This comes from a Rapid Response 47 at VP from, well, you know what? I'm just going to let it play out because they do that a lot. They'll put the quotes in, and sometimes I get a little ahead of myself and I read the quotes, and then 2 seconds later, he says exactly what I just read. So let's just give it a play.
You go back to the 4 years of the Biden administration, from 2021 until 2025, when we took over, the average price of a new home doubled. That's a 100% increase in 4 years. That priced millions upon millions of young Americans out of the housing market.
Completely
now, there's
out.
a little bit of good news here, because even though we've only been in power for about 7 months, you've already seen home prices flatten off a little bit. They've gone up, depending on what metric you believe, about 1%, maybe less than 1%.
Well, it also depends on which market you're living in too, because up in the Northeast, I'm sure they're still going up and up. And right now, it's a real conundrum. It's really difficult to try to get this back under control, because in places like in New England, they're still buying the properties though. Even though they've doubled, people are still buying them. So if somebody wants to sell their house for $1 million, even though it was only valued at, well, even if it's valued today at $500,000 and somebody wants to sell it for $1 million, if somebody buys it, they can buy it. And that increases the overall value of the neighborhood by a little bit. So it's a really tough situation. That the best way for housing to come down is if people just quit buying the damn houses. Let the houses sit on the market for a year until the owner is just in a position where they just have to lower it and lower it and lower it until somebody finally steps in and says, okay, that's a fair deal, I'll take that. And that's kind of the way it works. The only other way I can think of is mass unemployment. And definitely don't want that to happen. That definitely would be a catastrophe. And, you know, tons of foreclosures and what have you. I mean, that's going to drive down the market like crazy. But of course, the Trump administration, they're going to try like hell to make sure that doesn't happen. So how do you really force down the value of houses? Maybe go to the local property appraisal offices. From what I've heard, the state of Texas, some of those offices are being investigated for fraud because allegedly they were wildly inflating or valuing the value of entire neighborhoods, essentially doubling their value overnight, because it was a tactic they were using to try to get more property taxes out of people. So if the local property appraisal offices, they have the power to do it, they can raise the quote unquote value of entire neighborhoods to whatever price they want. And then of course they can tax significantly higher accordingly, especially if it goes above a certain tax bracket or whatnot. So that's another place that you can look at as far as trying to get the housing values under control. But anyway, I'll let VP Vance finish off.
It's a big improvement, but there's so much more that we got to do. And this is why the President of the United States goes after Jerome Powell for being too late, because of course the housing crisis in this country is really two things. Number one, that the prices are too high. We've made some progress on that. In some ways, more importantly, the interest rates are too high. So even if you can afford the top line dollar,
I don't think that's going to help at all. I think if they lower interest rates, it's only going to make the housing values go up even more. It is, because a lot of people are reluctant to buy a house right now because the interest rates are high, which forces people to keep their houses on the market longer. The longer they keep the houses on the market, the more they're pressured to sell the property, which will force them to lower their asking price until it reaches a point where somebody steps in and says, you know what, I will take it for that price, even though it's a 6% mortgage rate. I'm willing to do that. Or you get big corporations or big hedge funds that step in and they just gobble up all kinds of houses. I mean, that happened a lot in Florida. I'm sure it happened in many other states, maybe even including the state that you're living in. And I really honestly don't think interest rates are going to fix that at all. All it's going to do is just incentivize people to step up now and say, okay, now that the interest rates are down to 5% or 4%, you know, we've been waiting for that. I know housing is twice as much as it was 5 years ago, but knocking down a couple of percentage points on the interest rates, I mean, that's going to save like another $100,000 or however much it would save on the back end after your 30-year mortgage is paid off. So I mean, it's a real conundrum. I mean, if you have a different opinion on that, or if you know something I don't, definitely leave a comment to that effect. I really don't know. I just have a feeling that, you know, if anything, I think they should actually, it's probably way too late. They absolutely should have raised interest rates much higher back in probably 2021 or 22. Probably too late to do it now, but I think that would also be a contributor as far as getting housing down to a lower level in terms of value. would be to maybe raise up interest rates to like 8% or 9%. And I know a lot of people are going to say you're absolutely brutally insane for even suggesting that. As far as housing goes, I don't know, man. I think that's probably the most reasonable thing that you can do, as opposed to just stepping in and like having the government just forcing down house values, which I don't think they have the power to do anyway.
Value of a home,
maybe the state level.
If the interest rates are way too high because the Federal Reserve isn't doing its job,
people don't
that
sell,
also
dude.
Makes the American dream of home ownership unaffordable. So we're really working on both of those things.
I don't agree with that at all.
We had lower interest rates, we had to lower housing prices. We've made again progress, but it's early, and we realize there's a lot more work to do.
Whoop, sorry, I was muted. All right, so this comes from Scott Turner. He's responding to JD Vance saying, couldn't agree more, Vice President. Big news coming on that front. So, and he's Housing and Urban Development, right? Yeah, Scott Turner, Secretary of U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. So I have a feeling that he's going to say that the government's going to start subsidizing lower income people, that if you want to buy a house, the federal government might contribute like a $10,000 grant or something like that, which I completely disagree with also. I don't think the government should be giving any money toward housing to individuals, because I think that's only going to incentivize home sellers to just increase their prices more. I mean, if they find out that which they may not have the ability to find out if a home buyer is getting a government subsidy to buy their property, but if they did, what's to stop them from saying, well, you know what, the value just went up another 10 grand or something like that. Maybe that's not legal. I'm no expert in housing or anything like that. I just don't like the idea of the government, especially Republicans, because they don't generally like doing that, and just handing out taxpayer money to individuals who are quote unquote low income for housing, because the average house right now it's almost at 400,000. I think it dropped to like 380 or 390,000. But to qualify for the average priced home with a 30-year mortgage at a 6% or 6.5% annual percentage rate, the household income has to be at least $100,000 a year just to qualify for the average priced home in the U.S. And the average American family is not making $100,000 a year, not even close. It's like $27,000 away from that. So I think just dumping money in people's laps, that's only going to make it worse, in my opinion. But anyway, yeah, that's something. I'm kind of fiery when it comes to the housing market, because I live in Florida. I saw the worst of it during COVID. The properties, the number of properties that were for sale during the height of COVID was only like 7,000 properties statewide, and it skyrocketed the housing values here to the point where the vast majority of Floridians cannot even afford a house, not even close. In my area, you have to be making $106,000 a year just to qualify for the average priced home locally, and that's on average all around Tampa Bay, which is like a 3 million person metropolitan area. So yeah, it sucks. It sucks really bad. But things seem to be getting better in Florida in particular, because last I checked, we had about 250,000 houses on the market, and they're not selling because they're too damn expensive. And of course, the interest rates are preventing it. But these houses that have been sitting on the market for months and months, they're reducing their prices because the interest rates are high and nobody wants to get a mortgage. And that's how you get housing values down, I think. But again, what do I know? What the fuck do I know? I don't know.